She was laughing. Through the damn wall. While I was on the other side, sitting on the cold tile floor of our laundry room, holding a basket full of her unfolded clothes and a dry bloodstain on my thumbnail I couldn't remember getting. She was laughing, and I knew it wasn't because of anything I said. There was a time I used to be the reason. The jokes, the spark, the soft teasing that made her choke on her coffee in the mornings. But that laugh, the one I heard that night, it was effortless, wild, and it wasn't meant for me. I didn't mean to sit down. I just did. My legs folded like a deck chair, and I watched a pair of her socks slip from the basket onto the floor. She never matches them. I always do. Even the stupid ones with the avocados on them. I stared at the crack under the wall. There was light coming through. Flickering. TV light. Shadows moving. 2 shadows. I think I stopped breathing. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough to hear her whisper something, followed by another burst of that laugh, breathy and high, like a secret. I pressed my hand against the floor just to feel something real. Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of milk. Don't ask why. I don't even like milk. Maybe I just needed to do something that didn't feel like falling apart. And then she walked in. Makeup smudged, sweater half off one shoulder, phone in her hand. She looked at me like I'd ruined something, like I had interrupted. "Can we not do this tonight?" she said, brushing past me. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. But right as she reached the stairs, she stopped. Didn't turn around. Just froze. "I can't hug you anymore," she said quietly. And then she went up, step by step. No explanation. No apology. She left me standing there with my glass of milk and shaking hands. That was 3 nights ago. She doesn't know I recorded the audio from the other side of that wall. She doesn't know I've been listening to it on repeat. And she sure as hell doesn't know what I'm about to do next. I don't know what's worse, the silence or the sounds you wish you didn't hear. I sat on the floor with my phone clutched in both hands, volume maxed, the cheap little mic I had stuck through the wall picking up every breath, every creak of the mattress, every barely suppressed giggle that made bile rise in my throat. I didn't hear any names. No dirty talk. Just breathing. Heavy, overlapping, human. At first, I told myself it could be a TV. Maybe she was watching one of those shows where people whisper and kiss and fake their way through soap opera scenes. But I knew better. That breath wasn't scripted. That breath belonged to someone real, someone in my house, in my bed. And the worst part? She sounded alive again. That sound, her laughter through the drywall, kept looping in my head like a broken cassette. I found myself zoning out in the middle of brushing my teeth the next morning, toothpaste foaming in my mouth, while her voice echoed in my skull. The more I played the recording, the more it changed. Not literally, but emotionally. It went from shock, to pain, to anger, then to something far colder, calculation. I started to dissect it like an audio forensic. Why was she whispering right before she laughed? What did she say that got cut off? Was she kissing him in that part where it goes quiet for 5 seconds? I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the living room couch, staring at the stairs. She didn't come down. Didn't check on me. Didn't ask why I wasn't in bed. The woman who once cried when I twisted my ankle didn't even notice I hadn't eaten in 24 hours. The next morning, she greeted me with a dry morning, grabbed a banana, and left the house in joggers and lip gloss, like she was off to some innocent yoga class. I knew she wasn't. She doesn't even own a yoga mat. So I followed her. I know that sounds pathetic. And it was. I didn't even change out of my hoodie. I threw on mismatched shoes, grabbed my keys, and tailed her silver SUV in my rusted hatchback like some B-movie stalker. I felt sick, anxious, stupid, but not as stupid as I felt when she didn't turn toward the gym. She turned into a little corner bakery near downtown. I parked across the street, engine off, heart in my throat. And then he showed up. Not someone I recognized. Tall, dark coat, hair too perfect for a casual coffee run. He hugged her. She didn't hug back. Not the way she hugged me. She grabbed his collar and pulled him forward like they were in some teenage movie scene. She kissed him like she was starving. I was so stunned I forgot I was gripping the steering wheel until I realized my knuckles were white. She never kissed me like that. Not even on our wedding day. I sat there, engine dead, lips pressed together so tightly I could taste blood. I waited an hour. Maybe more. They sat inside laughing. Her hands kept touching his wrist like it meant something. When she finally left and drove home, I didn't follow. I just sat there, watching the people walking past my car, wondering how many of them were hiding the same secrets. Wondering how many were me. Later that night, she came home humming. She was actually humming. I was in the garage pretending to fix a broken lamp we both knew I'd never fix. She popped her head in and said, "Did you eat?" Like she hadn't just spent her afternoon in someone else's arms. I lied, said yes. She smiled and walked away. But the next thing she did, it shattered something permanent in me. She came back holding my favorite sweater and handed it to me and said, without a hint of irony, "You should wear this tomorrow. You look really good in it." I stared at her, sweater in hand, and in that moment I didn't feel rage. I felt nothing. And I think that's when I knew something inside me had turned off. I went upstairs, locked the door behind me, and started packing. Quietly, slowly, not like someone leaving in a storm, like someone escaping a prison. But before I left, I had one more thing to do. Packing was supposed to feel empowering, but it didn't. It felt like grief in slow motion. Folding shirts that still smelled like her laundry detergent, zipping a bag I bought on our anniversary trip, walking past the photo of us in matching Halloween costumes, both pretending we didn't regret that night. Every item I touched felt like a punchline to a joke I didn't get. I packed light. I told myself I was just clearing my head. But deep down I knew this wasn't a break. This was a burial. But right as I grabbed my laptop case from the closet, something fell. It was one of her sketchbooks. Laurel kept dozens of them stacked like bricks behind old shoeboxes. Most were filled with watercolor nonsense or to-do lists she'd never do. But this one was different. Smaller. Leather-bound. No stickers. No doodles. It looked like something you wouldn't want anyone to find. So I opened it. And I swear, for a second, I forgot how to breathe. The first page had my name on it. Just that. Vernon. Centered. Underlined twice. My heart pounded. I flipped the page. It was a list. A list of reasons I stayed too long. I won't lie. Part of me hoped it would be a list of her flaws. Of her guilt. That she'd describe how badly she felt. How torn she was. How sorry she'd become. But it wasn't that kind of list. It was methodical. Cold. A breakdown of how long she could endure our marriage based on her mental health, money, and patience. Each item made my face burn hotter. He folds my clothes exactly how Mom used to. He has panic attacks if I get home too late. He still thinks we have a phase to get through. I'll leave when I can afford to break him gently. What does that even mean? Break me gently? My chest felt like a rusted-out drum. I read on. There were notes about the guy, not by name, but code words. Ridge. The calm one. Apparently, she'd been writing about him for 6 months. Describing his stillness, his confidence, his opposite energy. I read line after line about how he made her feel weightless. How being around me felt like carrying a damp coat that never dried. I closed the book. I could barely see. My jaw ached from clenching it. And then I saw the date at the top of the last entry. Tomorrow. It simply said, "If he doesn't find out tonight, I'll tell him tomorrow after dinner." I stared at those words so long they blurred. She was planning her escape like a business pitch. She was going to tell me after dinner. Maybe while I was doing dishes. Maybe while we were halfway through a movie and I thought everything was okay again. Maybe she was going to say it softly, like it wouldn't sting. Maybe she was going to hug me while breaking me, thinking that would somehow soften the blow. But there would be no dinner. Not this time. I slid the journal under my hoodie and zipped it shut. Took the suitcase. Walked down the stairs with hands that barely functioned. Every step creaked like it was tattling on me. She was in the backyard, laughing again, this time on the phone. I could hear her voice through the cracked kitchen window. She was talking to someone, telling them she hoped it would go smooth, telling them I wasn't good with surprises. She had no idea I was already gone. I walked to the car, put my suitcase in the back. Then I made one last decision. I went back inside, not to confront her, not to cry, not to plead, but to take something that she wouldn't notice was missing, something small, something that might make her wonder. I took the batteries out of the remote control. I don't know why. I just wanted her to sit down, reach for it, and feel the silence. I wanted her to feel what it's like when something stops working and you don't know why. Then I drove, and I didn't check the rearview mirror once. But even on the highway, miles out, I could still hear her voice. And it wasn't finished with me yet. The first night away, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan of a roadside motel just outside Ashbury Pines, room 204, the one with the flickering hallway light and the vending machine that only took exact change. I kept the TV off. The silence felt heavier that way, like gravity was trying to pin me to the mattress and whisper, "You're nobody now." I stared at myself in the mirror across the room. One of those cheap motel mirrors bolted to the wall, warped at the edges, glass peeling from the corners. I looked like someone I wouldn't trust. Hollow eyes, a smudge of Laurel's lipstick still faint on my collar. My mouth twitched when I breathed, like it didn't believe the air was real. I raised my hand and waved at the mirror, just to make sure the reflection still followed. It did, but it looked smug. I tried to sleep sitting up, like maybe if I didn't lie down it wouldn't feel permanent. But when I closed my eyes, I saw Laurel, not the real one, but the version that lived in my memory. She was standing at the fridge in her pajama shorts, humming that same Fleetwood Mac song, licking peanut butter off a spoon. That version still kissed my temple when she walked past me. That version still let me touch her back without flinching. But that version was a lie too. Around 4:12 a.m. My phone buzzed. One vibration. No ringtone. It was a message from her. "Laurel." Just one line. "Are you okay?" I stared at it for almost an hour. I didn't reply. What was I supposed to say? That I was sitting alone in a room that smelled like cigarette ashes and bleach, trying to figure out whether the ache in my chest was heartbreak or just my own body trying to erase itself. I threw the phone against the bed and let it slide to the floor. Then I opened her journal again. I don't know why I took it. Maybe I wanted to hurt her. Maybe I just needed proof that she had once cared enough to write things down. But what I found this time was different. Not the cold lists, not the entries about Ridge. It was a torn page, stuck between the back cover and the last sketch. Folded in half. No date. No structure. Just a rush of words, written like she was afraid to think them out loud. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I just disappeared. Would Vernon notice? Would he beg me to stay? Or would he finally realize I haven't been here in a long time? He always thinks love is endurance. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's release. It hit me like a car wreck in slow motion. I suddenly realized she wasn't cheating because she found someone better. She was drowning, and I was the water. And somehow, that made it worse. Because I wanted to hate her, but now I couldn't stop blaming myself. I took a walk around the block in the dead of night. The streets were empty. A couple of gas stations lit up like lonely islands. I kept hearing footsteps behind me, but when I turned, it was just my own paranoia echoing back. I felt invisible, not in the dramatic, poetic sense, but literally invisible. No one looked at me. The world moved on. When I got back to the room, I found something strange. The motel key was on the dresser. I'd left it in my jacket pocket. I know I did. And the weirdest part? The little paper sleeve it came in, the one with the room number, it had a different number now. Not 204. It said 208. I opened the door. Same room. Same bed. Same humming refrigerator. But something was off. The air smelled different. The mirror looked cleaner. My suitcase had been zipped, and I never zip it. And then I saw it. The remote control from our house. It was sitting on the nightstand. The one I'd taken the batteries out of before I left. I stood frozen, heart pounding so hard I couldn't hear anything else. I didn't bring it. I know I didn't bring it. But there it was, same chipped corner, same duct tape on the back, same missing battery cover. I reached for it slowly, like it might bite. And taped to the underside was a note. A sticky note. One word, written in Laurel's handwriting. Why? I dropped it like it was on fire. And for the first time since I left, I felt afraid. I didn't sleep after that. I sat upright in the motel chair, elbows on my knees, staring at that sticky note like it was an exposed wire. My heart wouldn't slow down. The remote sat inches away, mute and ridiculous, a ghost from my own house, now sitting here, mocking me in a $43 a night room with a clogged sink and flickering light bulbs. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. Did she follow me? Was she here? Had she been here already? Or had I brought it with me somehow, packed in some half-conscious days and forgotten? No, I remembered everything I packed. I was methodical. I folded with intention, zipped with precision. I didn't take the remote. I didn't take anything except clothes, my laptop, her journal, and that pathetic urge to disappear quietly. But the remote was here, with a note. Why? I didn't know if it was a question or a threat. I didn't know if she was asking why I left or why I took the journal, or worse, why I stopped loving her, though that answer was still up for debate. Maybe she never believed I could. Maybe she thought I was incapable of detaching. She'd be almost right. I wanted to bolt. I grabbed my keys. yanked open the motel room door, and stepped into the hallway, only to stop dead. There was a folded blanket on the floor, motel branded, still warm. Someone had been outside my room. I looked left. Empty corridor. Looked right. The ice machine buzzed faintly in the distance. No voices. No footsteps. But that blanket hadn't been there when I arrived. I stepped over it, walked down the hall to the reception desk. No one was there. Just a half-empty Dr. Pepper can on the counter and a cat calendar stuck to the wall. I banged on the bell. Nothing. No sign in log. No camera. I checked my phone. Still no reply to her "Are you okay?" message. But I had a missed call. From a blocked number. I didn't call back. Instead, I walked back to the room slowly, checking behind me every few steps like some paranoid idiot in a bad thriller. I locked the door, pulled a chair in front of it, and checked every drawer and corner of the room. Nothing. No bugs, no notes, no signs of forced entry. Except one. The journal. It was open. I didn't leave it open. Page 17. The sketch of the tree behind our house. A childish drawing she once made after a wine night on the porch. Except now, someone had written over it, in thick black pen. "You misunderstood everything." I stared at the words for a long time, and something shifted in me. A sick realization started to bloom, slow and unwelcome. Maybe I had misunderstood everything. Maybe I was the villain in her story. Maybe she didn't cheat in the way I thought. Maybe she didn't lie about everything, just the parts she thought I couldn't survive. Maybe Ridge wasn't some fantasy replacement. Maybe he was a mirror she needed to hold up to herself, not a man she was planning to run away with. But none of that explained how her handwriting showed up in this room. None of that explained why I felt like I was being watched. By the time the sun came up, I hadn't moved. My legs were stiff, my mouth dry, my thoughts spinning. I decided I couldn't stay in the motel another night. I had to go somewhere else. Somewhere no one would think to look. So I drove. No music. No podcasts. Just the sound of my wheels cutting through morning fog. I didn't go to my parents' house. Didn't go to my brother's. He wouldn't have cared anyway. I drove all the way back to the town where Laurel and I first met. The college campus was still there, barely changed, though everything looked smaller now. I parked in front of the art building where she used to leave sticky notes on my car windshield. I thought maybe I'd find some kind of closure there. Maybe being near the place where she first saw something in me would remind me of who I used to be. But as I sat there, engine off, I looked down and noticed something on my passenger seat that hadn't been there when I got in. It was a manila envelope. No label. Just sealed shut with a single piece of black electrical tape. I swear to you, it was not there before. I locked the car. I checked it twice. I opened it slowly. Inside were photographs. Of me. From the last 48 hours. One of me buying coffee at the gas station. One of me standing outside the motel room, staring at the door. One, and this made my spine go ice cold, of me sleeping. In the motel bed. Underneath the stack of photos was another note. Same handwriting. "You left, but you never looked." That's when I realized something horrifying. I had been watching Laurel, but someone had been watching both of us. The photographs haunted me more than I care to admit. I laid them out on the passenger seat like puzzle pieces, like somehow if I arranged them in the right order, they'd tell me what the hell I was supposed to understand. There were 9 of them in total. All candid. All from angles I couldn't trace. Some were grainy, clearly taken from a distance. Others, disturbingly close. The one of me sleeping? You could see the crease in my pillowcase and the small scar behind my ear. A detail only someone who knew me would even think to frame. But it wasn't just the photographs. It was what was missing from them. In none of the photos did I see Laurel. Not once. Not even a reflection. Not a car. Not a shadow. As if someone was surgically cutting her out of the narrative, reframing this entire mess to make me feel like I'd imagined her entirely. And yet, there was one photo I couldn't ignore. It was me, standing outside a building I didn't recognize. A plain gray door. No windows. No sign. Just me, frozen mid-step, as if deciding whether or not to knock. Except here's the thing, I had never been there. I stared at that image so long, I began to wonder if it was doctored. Photoshopped. But I looked too real. The lighting matched. My clothes were right. The timestamp printed in the corner read 2:11 a.m., the night after I'd left Laurel. At 2:11 a.m., I had been in the motel room. Asleep. I was sure of it. So how was I in that photo? I couldn't answer that. But I knew I needed to find out where that door was. I ran it through a reverse image search on my phone. Nothing. I zoomed in on the doorframe. There was a smudge of blue paint on the wall beside it, faint but familiar. I dug through my mental Rolodex, flipping through memories like receipts. Blue paint, gray door, no windows. Then it hit me. Laurel's old art studio, from before we were married, back when she was still painting things that scared people. She had rented this room above an abandoned antique store on the edge of Riverton. She used to call it her panic cave, said it was the only place where she didn't feel the need to smile. I hadn't been there in years. I thought she gave it up when we moved into the house together. She never mentioned it again. Not once. But if that was where the photo was taken, I drove straight there. The town looked like a place time forgot. All the storefronts were boarded up or converted into vape shops and laundromats with broken neon signs. I found the antique store, Holloway's Collectibles, and parked across the street. The second floor had 3 windows, all dark, one slightly cracked open. The door from the photo was around back, just like I remembered. Still gray, still unmarked. I stood in front of it, heart hammering, fingers trembling. It was unlocked. The inside smelled like old plaster and turpentine. The stairwell creaked as I moved. I could still hear her voice echoing in this place. That nervous laugh she used to make when she spilled paint. The way she sang off-key when she thought I wasn't listening. I walked slowly, each step feeling like a betrayal of memory. At the top was the studio, and what I saw when I opened the door will stay with me forever. The room hadn't been abandoned. Not even close. There were candles, lit, flickering softly on the floor in a semicircle. Canvases lined the walls, dozens of them. But they weren't paintings. They were photographs, in large prints, of me. Everyone taken over the past several years. Me brushing my teeth. Me raking leaves. Me sleeping on the couch. Me driving. Me walking through grocery store aisles. All of them meticulously labeled by date. Some with handwritten notes scribbled underneath. He thinks I'm tired. He didn't see me watching today. He looked at the dog instead of me. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't art. This was obsession. I turned to leave, but something caught my eye. A canvas, still wet, half covered with a sheet. I pulled it off. It was me again. But this time, I was painted. Not a photo. Not digital. A hand-painted portrait. And in the painting, I was looking directly at Laurel, or whoever was behind the canvas. My expression was blank, lifeless, and across my chest, painted in red, were the words, "I stayed because you were mine." I stumbled back, knocking over one of the candles. It sputtered out on the floor, the smoke curling like fingers around my ankle. I turned and bolted out of the studio, down the stairs, back into the light. I didn't stop running until I got back to the car. And when I finally looked up, there she was, standing across the street. Still, silent, smiling. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to know I remembered this place. But she was already walking toward me. She didn't speak until she was close enough for me to smell her perfume. The same one she'd worn for years, only now it felt weaponized. She stopped 5 feet from me, that smile still painted across her face, like she'd been practicing it in a mirror. Calm, measured, like I was the one who had something to explain. "I thought you hated that studio," she said. I didn't respond. She took a step closer. "You used to say it gave you migraines. Too much turpentine in the air. Too many windows you couldn't close." Still, I said nothing. I didn't trust my voice. It was curled somewhere deep in my chest, behind whatever part of me hadn't yet fractured. "I figured," she went on, "if you hated it enough, you'd never come back. That's why I kept it. Because it was the only place you'd never look." She was calm. Too calm. Like a nurse explaining to a patient that the medicine won't hurt, even though it always does. Her arms were folded now, shielding herself from me, but I could see the twitch in her jaw. She wasn't as confident as she looked. That gave me just enough oxygen to speak. "I saw the paintings," I said quietly. "The photos. The messages." Her lips tightened, but she didn't flinch. She tilted her head like a therapist about to deliver a soft blow. "They're not what you think." "Oh, really?" I snapped, voice cracking. "Because to me, it looks like you've been watching me for years, like I was a subject, not a husband." "That's exactly the problem," she whispered. That sentence, 5 words, sucked the air out of the street. Cars passed. Wind pushed old leaves down the gutter. But everything felt distant. She stepped even closer, now only a couple feet away, and I noticed her mascara was smudged slightly under one eye. She hadn't been crying. She'd been wiping tears she didn't want me to see. You think love is watching, she said. You think it's folding my laundry and checking my breathing at night. You think it's control masked as care. You never saw me unless I was falling apart. My fists clenched at my sides. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her how many times I held her when she couldn't sleep, how I memorized her coffee order, how I scraped together enough money for that dumb anniversary trip when we couldn't afford groceries. But I didn't, because part of me knew she'd just twist it, reframe it, make it sound like I was the obsessive one. And maybe I was. Maybe we both were. I never cheated on you, she said suddenly, and it felt like a trap. I stared at her. She didn't look away. There was never a ridge, she said. That's what I called the part of me that wanted out. The version of myself that could escape you. You wrote about him. I wrote about me, she cut in. He was a placeholder. Something I invented so I wouldn't hate myself for dreaming of a life where I didn't have to ask permission to breathe. The weight of that landed harder than any slap could have. I staggered back half a step, and that was all the room she needed. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled something out. My wedding ring. I hadn't even noticed it was gone. Somewhere along the past few days, I must have taken it off without realizing. She held it delicately, like it might crack. You want to know why I said I couldn't hug you anymore? She said, voice suddenly trembling. I nodded, though my chest felt like it was going to explode. Because when you held me, she said, it felt like drowning with a life vest on. Safe, but not alive. I wanted to scream, to call her selfish, dramatic, ungrateful, but I didn't. Because deep down I knew she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to explain something she'd kept buried for years. And that was what hurt the most. She placed the ring on the sidewalk between us. No theatrics, no melodrama. Then she turned and started walking. And I just stood there, surrounded by memories that no longer felt like mine. But before she crossed the street, she stopped. Didn't turn around. Just said, you never looked at me. Only the version you needed me to be. And then she was gone. I stayed in that town for the rest of the day. I sat on a bench near the campus library, just watching strangers pass, wondering how many of them were pretending to. At some point, I pulled out her journal again, looking for answers, closure, anything. But there was one more note tucked into the back pocket of the leather binding. It wasn't hers. It was in a different handwriting. Smaller, more precise. And it simply said, she was never alone in watching you. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't over. Not even close. I left the journal on the park bench. It took everything in me not to take it with me, not to tuck it back into my coat like a wound I could keep reopening. But it didn't belong to me anymore. Maybe it never did. It was a record of someone unraveling in silence, trying to make sense of a life she couldn't speak out loud. And that silence was as much mine as it was hers. I stood up and walked. No destination, just motion. The way your legs carry you when your mind's not ready to let go. I ended up at a diner we used to visit on Sunday mornings, back when our biggest problem was who got to order the last cinnamon roll. I slid into a booth, ordered black coffee. No sugar. For once, it tasted exactly like it should. Bitter, hot, and real. I stared at my reflection in the napkin dispenser for a while. I didn't recognize the man there, but I didn't hate him either. He looked tired, yeah? But he also looked like someone who'd finally stopped lying to himself. My phone buzzed once more. Unknown number again. But this time, I answered. It wasn't Laurel. It was the motel manager from Ashbury Pines. He sounded nervous, almost out of breath. Said he was sorry. Said he didn't know who else to call. Said he found something in my room after I left, something I needed to see. I drove back, cautiously, half expecting another trick. Another layer to unravel. But when I got there, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a receipt. For a storage unit. Rented under my name. Except, I'd never opened a storage unit. I almost threw it away. But I didn't. And that changed everything. The unit was small. Cold. Bare concrete walls, and a single hanging bulb that buzzed louder than it lit. But what was inside wasn't creepy. It wasn't stalker photos or confession tapes or some secret conspiracy. It was art. Paintings. All of me. But not the kind I'd seen in the studio. These were different. I was smiling in them. Genuinely smiling. At her. At our dog. At a sunset we watched from the roof the night we got snowed in and ran out of firewood. These weren't distortions. They were honest. Honest in a way I hadn't let myself be in years. And in the center of the room, framed, carefully wrapped in cloth, was one last painting. It was both of us. On the porch swing. She was looking at me. I was looking back. And on the bottom corner, in tiny red ink, were the words, "Before the noise." I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough to cry, quietly, the way you cry when you're not sad, just full, like your heart is finally heavy enough to rest. I walked out into the sun. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was running. Not from her. Not from myself. I didn't go back to the house. I didn't try to fix what broke. Some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be left behind so you can grow into something new. I found an apartment a few towns over. Small. Quiet. There's a bookstore across the street and a coffee shop with 2 strong espresso. I started painting. Badly. But it's mine. And no one's watching me anymore. Not her. Not the version of me I pretended to be. And you know what? Sometimes I still think about her. But not with anger. With warmth. She taught me how to leave when staying meant drowning. She taught me that sometimes love ends quietly, not with slamming doors, but with someone whispering, "I can't hug you anymore." And when that moment comes, you don't scream. You don't beg. You stand up. You breathe. You walk away. And then, you start again.